we have a new Microsoft Viva learning path or learning module, which is focusing on the ACE development. And this is basically building a SharePoint framework powered adaptive card extensions for Microsoft Viva Home and Viva Connection. And I'll talk a bit about what is Microsoft Viva Home and Viva Connection in a second, because Viva Home is going to be starting to roll out quite soon worldwide. So that is a great opportunity of building extensibility for Microsoft 365, and then from those ACEs, you're actually redirected, for example, to Microsoft Teams applications or any other sources. But in this particular case, the Learn module really focuses on ACE development. So how do we build those ACEs? What are the different options on these adaptive card extensions? What is the relationship between a SharePoint framework component and SharePoint framework code and adaptive card technology? SharePoint framework is basically the orchestrator behind the scenes for ACEs and hitting the API and then feeding the API information for adaptive cards, which are then rendering the UX out. As part of this module, there is, thank you AC for correcting, it is a Learn module. As part of this module, there's 3 distinct exercises from getting started to more complex scenarios. And also this includes the usage of media selection location capabilities in ACE. So we kind of cover the latest and greatest on the ACE development as well. It's both available in both written and in video format. So it's up to you how do you actually follow up on the guidance. And we'll release actually the videos also in YouTube channel starting tomorrow. It's altogether 1 hour and 52 minutes in both in a written and a video formats. And you can get it to aka.ms Viva ACE Learn is the URL and which is happening there. So again, HTTPS aka.ms/viva/ace/learn is the location, how to get there. Now, this is all based on SharePoint Framework development. SharePoint Framework was originally released already in 2017, and it's not just about SharePoint. You can actually build for Microsoft Teams, Microsoft Viva, and nowadays also for Outlook on Microsoft 365 apps. So the same piece of code actually can be running across all of the technology stack. Technically, however, the ACEs are card specific, and the ACEs are then rendered either in the Microsoft Viva Home, which is the one on the left side, or in the Viva Connection, which you can see on the right side. So there's a bit of a difference on the Viva Home and Viva Connection. There's going to be more information on the Viva Home rollout and capabilities and options in the future. But as you can see in the Viva Home on the left side or in the mobile views, they are ACE cards. They are ACE components. They're adaptive card components, which are being rendered in that kind of a card format. And this learning path really focuses on, okay, what are these cards? How can I modify them? How they are being exposed? What are the different options? And how would I use them? For example, location information and media upload information in a mobile device view, because these are really designed for mobile first experience. They, of course, work really well in a desktop, but the main target here is the mobile first. I'm, for example, personally using Viva Home and Viva cards on a daily basis within my mobile. It's the easiest way to access information and some of the services. But to be able to understand how do we get started on building these ACEs, I will actually turn the audience and turn the microphone to Andrew Connell, who's going to do the first exercise on this learning module, and we're going to continue these exercises in upcoming weeks as well. And AC, we can see the screen. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Vesa. Yeah, so I want to just run through the first demo for this, but that we have in this, or the first lab exercise / demo that we have in this module. Before I go in there, though, I just want to talk a little bit about the module itself, just to add on a little bit about what Vesa just talked about. This is a new Microsoft Learning module, which consists of like lectures and hands-on lab exercises. What I'm doing is the first hands-on lab exercise that we have in this module. So just real quick, this is just who I am, Andrew Connell. You can see well, there you go, look at that at the very bottom. Classic CSS problem. That's exactly why I don't do design and stick with the development stuff. So I'm a Microsoft MVP, specifically around Office development. Been doing SharePoint for, actually this year, it's 20 years. So I don't recommend that. But doing anything for 20 some years is a long time. Anyway, so let's go into the module. So what this module is called Creating Adaptive Card Extensions with the SharePoint Framework. Got all my keywords in there. There's a link to where you can find it as well. The link that Vesa just showed a second ago is also there. That is also on the slides. That's also been shared. One thing too, just to highlight here, if you want to see the videos for this, if you want to see like the download for the code and the samples for this, all this stuff is available right now. You can get to it. The videos haven't been like made public or publicized or anything like that, but they're all still there. They're all still there. They're all publicly available. They're just not like indexed. So if you know YouTube, it's basically all the videos are there, but they're just all listed as unlisted right now until they're kind of released out. If you go to the intro section of this module that I'm linked to right here, you'll be able to see a link at the bottom of the intro module. One points to a GitHub repo that contains the slides that go along with the module. I'm not going through those. And then it also contains, I'm not going through those in this demo today. And it also has a link to the screencast that's on YouTube that consists of all of the parts of this module if you want to do that stuff. All right, I'm going to get out of PowerPoint because we're going to do some real work here. Let me kind of first show you what this thing does. And it's a very simple example. Keep in mind, this is a demo. It's made for people trying to learn how this stuff works. So let me go ahead and run this thing first. All this is an adaptive card extension that demonstrates how to read and write to a SharePoint list. Ignore all the yellow stuff. Those are just warnings. We don't care about those as developers. I'm going to come over here and open up my workbench in my test site here. So that's just _layout/workbench.aspx. And I'm going to go ahead and add my my ACE to my page. So here's on my page, you see it says I'm missing a list ID. The reason for that is because we're going to show read and write data to a SharePoint list. So if we're going to do that, I got to have a SharePoint list. So let me go back over to my list. I'm going to go to my ACE data list, which is going to contain, just like everybody else, I store all the movies that I watch in a SharePoint list. No, not really. That's pretty lame. But this makes for a more interesting demo. So you can see what our family Christmas movies are that we've been watching over the break recently. So I will paste that in and save my changes. And then I'll come over here and I will flip this from my edit mode over to display mode so I can actually see the content. I will click on the card itself and it'll show me a list of the movies that we've been watching as a family. So Inception, Interstellar, Dead Poet Society, Die Hard, good Christmas movie. And last night we watched the Batman from last year. So anyway, so let's go back. The movie that's on our list tonight is that we'll add in just a minute. Actually, we'll go ahead and add it right now. So I want to add an item. I can go ahead and I can click on add an item. So I can go add an item. So let me go grab the movie that's on deck for tonight. Let me just copy and paste because we'll type this in. And we are watching Fight Club because my daughter is on a school trip out of town, so we don't have to subject her to this or expose her, I guess, to it. And there we go. Oh, wait, a couple more movies: Sixth Sense, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, and Fight Club got added. And I come over to my list and I look at the ACE data, and I can see the item that we just added here for Fight Club. So cool. How does all this stuff work? All right, so now I'm going to come back over here to, let's go ahead and close this out and let's take a look at the code for this now that you've seen how this works. So again, if you're not familiar with ACEs, just really briefly, when you click, this is the card view that you get initially, and then all these things that pop up are called quick views. If you click on the card view, you have the option here to display, to do something. And in my case here, I'm displaying a quick view, which is this kind of a display view that I'm just created a carousel to cycle through the items I got back from my SharePoint list. And then the button add item was going to go through and open up a different quick view that I want to use. So if I come over here and look at the code, let's see how this is all set up here. Where's my code? Right here. So everything kind of centers around in an adaptive card extension or an ACE. Everything centers around like a center of gravity, right? And that center of gravity is the adaptive card extension.ts file that's going to be in your project. Now this file here contains a couple things that are interesting that you should pay attention to. So the only things that I think are really like that are really important to pay attention to is that you've got an interface for properties. This works the exact same way as a web part does if you've done anything with the SharePoint Framework web parts, where this is just the definition for all the public signature of your component, or you can store different settings. The state, if you've done anything with React, this is basically the same thing as the state. And what the state is this is going to be a way for you to store name value pairs for your component that are accessible everywhere throughout the component. And that includes in the card views and in the quick view. And whenever you change something in the state, it's going to tell the rendering engine to re-render the card all client side. Now, the next section that's kind of important here is a list of the different IDs. Each one of your cards has to have an ID. So we have card views and quick views. Generally speaking, the card view is not going to be exported because we're only going to use that inside of the center of gravity adaptive card extension. And then in the quick views, the two quick views we have here, these IDs are exported because we're using them from somewhere else. Either, in my case, I'm using one of them from the card view itself, or another one I'm using it from the card view when I click the button. All right. So those are defined, and all that is just a unique string. I could put whatever I want in here to make this work. Like, I mean, I could even just make this, literally just make it whatever I want without any proper spelling. Doesn't matter. But we're not going to test it, so just trust me on that one. Then the next thing I have to do is inside of the on init, I need to use these things called navigators. These view navigators, essentially these are just like arrays, and I have to go through and tell the adaptive card extension rendering engine, hey, these are things that you can use, that we can refer to, and we refer to them based on an ID, and then we give it an object that's going to get instantiated when the view is activated. And then the last thing I'm doing in my initialization is I'm going to go load all of my data. And this code is not how I would write stuff in a production thing, so don't judge me on my code. This is for educational purposes. So I would only call set state once and set the properties on both of them, just trying to be explicit on what we're changing here. In this case, I'm grabbing the title of the list that's selected and the items from the list, provided I have a list ID that's defined, and I'm setting those values. That's how I'm going to be initializing my component on the page. Finally, the last thing that's interesting here is my render card. The other thing that's interesting, what that's going to do is simply tell the ACE engine to which card I want it to display for my adaptive card extension or for my ACE, and that's where I'm passing in the ID. Finally, the last thing I'm doing here is in this class, this is from the property pane, or I'm using this in the property pane. I'm saying, hey, whenever a specific field or property called list ID changes, and provided it has changed with my new value, old value check, then I want to do the same thing I do in initialization. That's why I want to go get some data. So I'm just telling it to go back and do that. Otherwise, clear it out. There's nothing to see here. All right, so now the next piece that's going to get rendered then is that when this thing gets added to the page is my card view. So if I go look at my card view, it's defined in my cardview.ts file. This is going to get instantiated because I had a view navigator that was set. My card view navigator had an ID, had something added to it by its ID, and I passed in an instance of this class. So when my center of gravity class returned back in the render method the card view ID, that's how this one's getting registered. This guy's only got three things that are interesting. He's got what happens when I click the card itself, not a button on the card, but the card itself. Well, I want to show a quick view. Which one? This one, right? The one that we exported a little bit earlier. Okay, well, what do you want to put on the card? What buttons do you want to put on it? Well, in this case here, I can pass back a button, two buttons, or no buttons. And in this case here, I'm saying, well, if there's no list ID defined, well, I can't do anything because I'm not working with the list. So I don't post that. I post back nothing. Otherwise, I'm going to add my add item button that when I click on it, it's going to launch a quick view. Which one? This one. And then finally, my data method. What is that guy going to do? My data method is going to display is simply going to return back an object that is going to get meshed with the card view. And these are some well-known properties on the card view that I can get rendered out. Now, the interesting thing, though, where this comes in, my last few minutes I have here, is to look at my quick view. So the first quick view is when I clicked on the card and I had that thing pop up off to the right that was going to show me a list of all of my my carousel list of all of my items. So how does that work? Well, if I come over here and look at my quick view, what I'm doing here is I'm returning my data. I have the same kind of setup again. So I have my data, I have my template, which is going to define where's the adaptive card, where's the JSON that defines the adaptive card. And I'm saying it's right there. So you can see that in the project. We're not going to go look at JSON right now, but that card, that JSON is defining the structure for my card, and it has little call outs or placeholders for where I want to inject data elements to it. What data elements? Well, the ones that I'm returning back in my data method here. So my data method or my data accessor method, what I'm doing here is I'm passing back all of the items that I get back from the SharePoint list item. And I'm also passing back two properties here, one called previous enabled and one called next enabled, because those are my two little toggles I have on either side of the item. And if I'm at the beginning of the array, I don't want to have a previous. If I'm at the end of the array, I don't want to have a next. And I know I could put some like kind of loop around kind of a thing, but I'm trying to keep it simple and it's a demo. So that here, I'm just checking to see, am I on the current item? Is the very first item in the list, is that the one that I'm on? Or am I on the very last item of the list? And that's just going to be setting those two properties. And in my JSON for the adaptive card, that's got a visibility property set to true or false. That's going to define if something's going to show up or not. The next thing that I'm going to do, so when I go, and then the other thing that's interesting about this, I will show you one piece to this. I'm going to lie a little bit here, is that my buttons that I'm using to display stuff. So my previous button that has this, the chevrons pointing to the left side versus the chevrons pointing to the right side. I've got a selected action here that says that my type is a submit and my ID is going to be an integer. So in this case here, in previous, I want to go back one, so -1. Whereas I'm going to use on the plus on the, when I go next, I want to go, or next, I want to go +1. So what I'm doing is inside, when someone clicks one of those buttons, that's going to trigger my on action. I'm going to check and see, is it a submit? And if it isn't, then get out of here. Otherwise, go get the current index that we're on, and then just take that index and increment it by whatever the value of the ID is. And I might be incrementing it by -1 to go back in the index to show me which one's there. So what does that do? That's going to go back and change the index. That's going to cause a re-rendering. That's going to change the item that's going to be displayed inside of my quick view. But then last but not least, what happens when I click the add item button? Well, that's going to launch the quick view called new item quick view. And what this guy does, he's got his JSON set up where I've just got title and description set up, and then the whole submit button as well set up. If I look at the new item quick view for this one, this guy works basically the same way, but what's interesting about him is in his on action, he's checking to do if the action is a submit action. And if it is, then I want to go save the item. So the way I'm going to save the item is it's an asynchronous method, and because the on action is not asynchronous, it's returning a void, so you can't just do a special little async on here, and nobody wants to play with promises. So what I ended up doing was I just wrapped it up in an iffy, and so I made that iffy asynchronous, and so that's how I'm doing an asynchronous thing inside of a synchronous statement, as synchronous as JavaScript can really be. And so here I'm saying go add an item, which is coming from some service that I created here. This is not a demo on working with the SharePoint REST API. So that's all that service contains all that code on reading and writing to the list. So here I'm going to pass back things like the context, the list ID, and then the properties for the item I'm going to save. And then once I've saved the item, well, then let's go back and let's go get all those items and refresh our array so that now when I go back and click on the card view again, it's going to show me those items being displayed. And then finally, I want to remove it from the quick view. In this case, this is a cool thing about these navigators is we have a way to like push and pop stuff off the stack. In this case, I'm popping it off the stack. Well, since there was nothing else on the view stack for my quick view, popping it's going to basically close the quick view. But I could have just as easily said close right here, and this would have closed the quick view as well and had the same effect in this case. However, you're going to see in the next 2 weeks, unfortunately, you got to deal with me again for the next 2 weeks, because next week I'm going to show you another demo from the second exercise from the same module that shows how to do work with a image card view and how we're going to be fetching data from an external service, something that everybody should be familiar with, one of the NASA open APIs to show images from a Mars rover. And then the last demo is much more involved on working with the Viva Connections actions for showing and getting locations using the Bing Maps control that's available to us. So if you're interested in seeing those, join me again, same time, same place next week, or same time, same place in 2 weeks. So that's it. That's all I got.
Excellent. Yep, thank you, AC. There's nothing unfortunate for you to actually do the demos in this call in upcoming weeks, just to correct on that.